I'm Matt at Nexus Baseball, and this is episode 45 of the Tommy John Epidemic. This series is a YouTube read of content from the book Plague of the Gods, an outsider's perspective on baseball's Tommy John Epidemic, which is available now on Amazon. I decided to put this content on YouTube to make the material as accessible as possible. This series examines the science behind the most superhuman action the human body can produce, accelerating a baseball up to 100 miles per hour. But who does this instruction? The development of strength movements is usually the domain of the strength and conditioning coach, while the execution of drills and sport-specific training is the realm of the pitching coach. Neither of these groups has the data-driven knowledge of the analytics department. Instead, all three try to coordinate as best they can, but due to conflicting responsibilities and personalities, rarely create a comprehensive program. Instead, they end up frequently working cross-purposes and in isolation, with the pitching coach unable to comment on how the training staff is training their pitcher, and likewise, the pitching coach being out of their element sending back instructions the other way. Instead of this setup, a comprehensive approach is necessary, with pitching coaches that not only understand the craft of developing and executing a pitching repertoire, but with a detailed understanding of the anatomy involved, how to apply it, and the implications thereof. At the same time, they must be well versed in data analytics to use the available technology to get in-depth feedback on results and understand what physical changes are driving those results. A good coach needs the book knowledge as well as the practical knowledge to handle each of these spheres, while being an effective communicator and motivator. Currently, this resume rarely exists, but should be a goal of developing future coaches. Part of this is not just hiring former pitchers to be pitching coaches, but hiring from different spheres and drawing top talent to the industry with the salaries to match. Baseball spends billions on player salary, but too often ignores the benefits of incentivizing and developing top coaching talent to get the most out of their multi-million-dollar athletes. Instead, many athletes must develop these capabilities themselves, such as JD Martinez, who took his destiny into his own hands and re-engineered his swing from the ground up by conducting his own research and experimentation. It is distressing that at the highest level of the sport, there doesn't exist more of a focus on baseline development and the encouragement of technical change and prowess. A player like Martinez had to make these changes on his own while attending Venezuelan winter ball. There are potentially hundreds of players in the minor leagues that could have a higher ceiling of performance if they were assisted from the ground up with targeted coaching. Likewise, baseball seems to be content to allow organizations such as ASMI, as well as various curious parties at different research universities, to push the science forward at an organic pace, rather than paying for hard science themselves. Teams are starting to make strides by bringing in outside research talent, but this has mostly been on the technology side. The technology is more advanced than ever and accelerating at a rapid pace, but the science and know-how to apply it to the on-field product is still greatly behind the curve. A perfect example of this is the tools that coaches and trainers use to develop the athletic capabilities of their pitchers. Common tools include gravity weights to help develop muscles big and small. These tools are used due to a combination of tradition and ease of use. Proponents would argue that they allow the greatest capacity for resistance for general athleticism and strength. A counterargument would be, why use a training method that in no way mirrors the force generation of the sport? Baseball is a rotational sport that utilizes balls from 5 ounce in weight to bats that weigh usually around 32 ounces, or about 2 pounds. Why would squatting 400 pounds, or 6,400 ounces, on the sagittal or linear plane of motion assist force generation rotationally using such low weights? There is no similar downward force in baseball. If balance and postural strength are the goals, would 100 pounds not work adequately for the purpose? Yet many pitchers and hitters do heavy barbell exercises and push the weight significantly, as if there is a benefit to getting that exercise to the maximum weight possible. In fact, there is a net negative to that approach, as the higher the weight load, the greater the load on the joints and the greater the chance of potential injury. Players around baseball are suffering from rampant hamstring injuries from overdeveloping these muscles due to incorrect methodologies, coupled with poor mobility and muscular control. Tools should be used that best mimic the planes of motion utilized in baseball, at moderate loads in different speeds and intensities, to both generate muscular growth, strength, and control. Linear exercises should be performed for similar goals and incorporate elements of rotation and counter-rotation to build balance through different ranges of motion that might be lost with single sport specialization. Pitching training as well should be approached from the perspective of the best tool for the job. As the muscles involved in the pitching motion are developed individually and then as chains, boxing has a fantastic model for this development, where fighters use several sport-specific training methods such as shadowboxing, heavy bag work, speed work, as well as sparring to develop well-rounded mechanics in addition to strength and cardio training. The concept of shadowboxing is that the boxer works absolute speed and the ability to decelerate the arm without the assistance of hitting an object, while being able to train without the weight of gloves and focus purely on the motion using just their hands. Pitchers would do well to train in this manner as well, when developing and maintaining their motion. Most of the complication of balancing the arm is in relation to the proportion of the grip. By removing the complication of the grip and going at 70% power, the arm should be able to be supported through the motion for significantly more practice throws than in a standard bullpen. Pitchers currently use the towel drill in much the same way, where they hold a towel in the hand and throw that in place of the baseball. As the arm flies forward, the towel creates drag, providing resistance on the arm. The problem with this is that it re-adds the complexity of balancing the arm while having to grip the object correctly, as well as ruining the release point by adding a variable amount of drag. By removing the drag and using open hand throwing, the pitcher can instead focus on the ideal release point with decreased arm stress. The concept of the speed bag is to utilize the rotator cuff to balance and rotate the arm quickly, without bringing the larger muscles into the process. The equivalent in baseball to this approach would be the use of weighted implements, such as weighted baseballs. For the legs and core, the difference between a standard 5-ounce ball and a 6-ounce weighted ball is trivial. But for the rotator cuff stretch of the subscapularis, the 20% increase in weight is significant. The greater the weight is increased, the more of a stretch response can be elicited, but only to a point. As the subscapularis becomes stronger and denser, it requires more force to stretch. Therefore, the external rotators must be developed to balance out this increased strength, or the arm can suffer injury at the elbow or shoulder due to the imbalance. Likewise, if too great a weight is used, the deltoids and/or lats will fire to help support the much weaker rotator cuff, defeating the purpose. Additionally, the forearm muscles might overflex to try and bring the heavier weight forward, ruining the release point. Fortunately, as the weight increases, the arm speed decreases as well, making the arm easier to balance by default. Therefore, in a well-designed program used by a pitcher with good mechanics, weighted baseballs are a safe tool to build velocity using the correct muscles. The heavy bag is where the boxer works on force generation, putting all of the parts of the body together to generate maximal power. The equivalent to this in pitching would be using cables or light weights to train the overall strength of the serratus and rotator cuff muscles through the motion. Finally, boxers use sparring to develop the match skills required, which would be equivalent to a pitcher throwing a bullpen and the closest amalgam of all the skills utilized in the game itself. After utilizing weighted implements to develop velocity, and at the final stages of development, is the use of long toss. Traditionally, long toss has been executed in training or as a warm-up by playing catch at a short distance and then gradually increasing the distance with each throw, often reaching significant distances well over 200 feet for professionals. The pitchers then go into the bullpen to throw once the arm is stretched out. I would argue that although a pitcher can warm up in this manner, it is inefficient, as the body mechanics to throw a ball with loft by dropping the back shoulder are antithetical to mound throwing, where the shoulders should remain level. The mechanics are subtly different and usually require, when the back shoulder drops significantly, the lat muscle to stretch and pull down on the arm to wheel it over the top. The alternative is to change the release point, which makes arm balance equally as challenging and can ruin the release point of the pitching motion. Join me for episode 46 next week. Remember, if you like the content, please like and subscribe. Your support makes this work possible. Also, if you want to jump ahead, please consider picking up the book on Amazon from the link in the description below. See you next week.